In this presentation, I will talk about ecosystem services and its beneficiaries. Ecosystem services are services that are provided by ecosystems, essentially. Um, and of the many categorizations of services that are provided by ecosystems, I will talk about a categorization that was done by the Millennium Ecosystem Assessment, which was a study performed in 2005 globally that described and characterized ecosystems around the world. And so, according to this assessment, there are four big groups of ecosystem services. The first one is related to the support services, which are the services necessary for the production of other services, such as soil formation, nutrient cycling, and primary production. Then there's a second group, which are the provision services, which are essentially the products from ecosystems, such as food, fresh water, firewood, fibers, biochemicals, and genetic resources. There's a third group called the regulatory services, which are related to regulation of ecosystem processes, such as climate regulation, disease regulation, water treatment, and pollination. And there's a fourth group, which are the cultural services, which are the intangible ecosystem services. These are really the ones that are related to religion and spiritual kind of services, recreation and tourism, aesthetic services, inspirational, educational, and cultural heritage. Um, when you talk about ecosystem services, there's a concept that needs to be taken into account, which is the concept of trade-offs. The trade-offs are basically the exchange between the provision of one ecosystem service that affects another one. So, for example, if you if you are taking advantage or let's say harvesting provision services such as firewood or food or fibers from a certain ecosystem, let's say a forest, you have to take into account that if you overuse this provision services, you might be affecting some regulatory services, like for example, water regulation. What happens if you are perhaps extracting too many trees from a forest, and those trees are helping the system to filter pollutants or contaminants from water. What happens if you are extracting key species that contribute to be home or be habitat for pollinators? Then you will be affecting pollination. So every act or every harvest or use of a certain ecosystem service might be affecting another one. And that's essentially the concept of trade-off. So it's very important to take this into account because when you are evaluating ecosystem service, the trade-off is a key matter here. So graphically, um, you have to take into account always that um, every ecosystem yields a magnitude of services, but also every ecosystem is connected to each other in the way of trade-off, or they are transferring energy between one another or matter. So it's important to take into account that ecosystem services provide, or I must say, ecosystems provide services on their own, but they are um, also connected at a landscape level. So it's not we cannot take each ecosystem individually when we are analyzing this. There are some concepts that are also important when we are considering ecosystem services. So the first one is functions, and functions are processes carried out by the ecosystem structures such as soil retention, water infiltration, reduction of runoff, and photosynthesis, for example. So these functions are basically functions, or I must say, biophysical functions from the ecosystem that eventually might provide a service, but not necessarily. So it takes me to the next concept, which is service. And the service is the product of functions that allow human use. For example, clean water flows, purified air, and wild fruits. So a function is connected to a service as long as that function is benefiting or is allowing human use. So I always put the example of imagine a watershed in the middle of the Amazon with no human communities around. There are plenty of functions that allow the system to, um, let's say, to yield uh, pure water in the river. So there are there's good vegetation cover, and there are good conditions that allow the system to be yielding uh, water of good quality. But and that's a result of many functions in the ecosystem. But if these functions are not providing the service for a human community or for a group of humans, that cannot be considered as a service. That's the main difference. Um, so below services or next to services, there's another concept which are benefits. And the benefits are the specific uses that people make of ecosystem services, like, for example, drinking water for consumption, recreation, irrigation or hydropower, um, food security, income from firewood sales, quality of life due to the absence of respiratory diseases. So if we keep if we continue with the example of water, um, we can say that one service might provide multiple benefits. So, for example, if we are talking about clean water flows, that can provide a number of benefits, like, for example, drinking water or water of good quality for recreational purposes, like, for example, going to a river with your family to enjoy it and to swim. That's one benefit, and that benefit is different from, for example, supply of drinking water, but they are both being produced by the same service, which is clean water flows. So this needs it's very common to be confounded by these two concepts, but it's important to take this to take these differences into account. And after benefits, we have the value. And the value is the change in human well being and the associated costs produced by ecosystem benefits. So, for example, the avoided costs of municipal water treatment, or the avoided costs of search and adaptation of alternative water sources, or, for example, water related health effects. So if we are, and always for value, we need to take into account a baseline. So the question is always, what happens if you're not receiving this this benefit from this specific service, and that's been based on that difference. That's how you calculate value. So um, when you're talking about, for example, in the first example here, the avoided costs of municipal water treatment, to calculate those avoided costs, you need to understand what would happen under a scenario where you don't have these additional benefits or these additional services. And when since we are approaching the concept of beneficiaries, and since we are talking about water funds here, it is very important to also take into account the different types of potential beneficiaries that your water fund or that your financial model to protect your watershed has. So we have a number of possible stakeholders. The first of them is the member of the water fund. This is perhaps the most important stakeholder in the picture. This member of the water fund will always be involved in the water fund. They will be involved from the beginning in the creation of the water fund. They will participate in the approval of the strategic documents. The water fund and provide financial support to it. So this is a very important stakeholder to take into account. The next possible stakeholder are the ones that are related to collaboration and coordination. So these are generally not members of the water fund, but they are important to support, for example, land use planning, development planning, and environmental regulation. So some public institutions might not have the time, the resources, the personnel to devote more time to the water fund, but they are definitely interested. They're definitely beneficiaries of the water fund. So they might offer some connection to other stakeholders as well as coordination. There's a third group of stakeholders, which are the upstream stakeholders, very important. These are the inhabitants of the watershed on whose properties the water fund will implement activities on the ground. So it's very important to take this group of stakeholders into account from the beginning because they will be the ones who you will have to negotiate conservation agreements or restoration plans because every action, every green infrastructure, nature-based solution is probably going to happen in their lands. So these are very important to take into account from the beginning. We have also technical experts. They can be active in the water fund or passive in some cases, but they're quite important as well because they are technical experts on the matters that are related to the watershed, social matters, physical matters, biological matters, hydrological matters, everything related to the science behind or the technical issues behind the creation of the waterfront is going to be in charge of this group of stakeholders. So these technical experts include institutions or individuals who possess detailed technical knowledge of the study area. They can be universities, they can be public or private science institutions, so very important as well. We also have NGOs and other organizations. This group of stakeholders include organizations that might already be implementing conservation or restoration actions in the field, or that have specific experience in that. So you want to approach this also for these organizations also from the beginning because because they might help you build confidence with the upstream stakeholders, for example, because they have already been working with them. You want to approach them as well because they know the study area. So these are a group of importance as well from the beginning. There's also a group of stakeholders that are related to development agencies and philanthropy. Um, this arises if the study area is a priority for development agencies or a donor. These stakeholders are important to generate financial support for the fund. They don't always appear from the beginning. They might appear as long as they see that the water fund is progressing in their creation. Um, but also since they are a potential source of funding for the water fund, they need to be addressed and they need to be considered in this stakeholder mapping. And there's a last group, also very important, but potentially, or I must say, important because they're potentially problematic. Um, they are the non-favorable interest parties, which are any interested party that might oppose or criticize the waterfront. And then you should think of a strategy to reduce any opposition or risk that these stakeholders may present. So it's not it's I would say it's not that common, but in some cases there are these these kind of stakeholders appear, and they can, depending on their influence, they can be problematic in the creation of a water fund. So they should be always taken into account. They should always be in your mind, and you should approach them to, or at least think about a strategy to minimize their impact in the creation of your water fund.